in the council chambers. So I know they're still working out some of the bugs in terms of broadcasting and hosting the meeting in there. So I think we'll probably see how tomorrow night's meeting goes, and then we'll have a department head meeting on Wednesday morning, and we may have a better sense after that what our timing looks like. I'll certainly let you know if we're back in there again. So I would say for now, assume Zoom unless you hear otherwise. And then if we ultimately are able to meet in person, which would be great, I'll certainly send a note out and let you all know. First of all, it'll be on the cover of the agenda, but I'll let you know in advance of that, that we're meeting in there.
I would think with the Delta variant, we may be going back into a semi-lockdown again.
Yeah, let's hope not.
Yeah.
As long as we're vamping a bit, I know we're almost late. I just got a text message from Mark Hansen. He's having trouble getting in.
Yep, I got the same text.
Yeah, I got the same text.
He's registered for it.
It's not popping up as an attendee.
No. He should be able to just log on as an attendee, right?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have the link. He never got a confirmation email.
I just got a message from the city clerk saying they're going to resend it to Mark.
Okay,
Thanks.
we ready to get going?
Yeah,
Yeah, it looks like we have everyone. It just depends on whether you want to, if you were waiting for Mark to see if he could log back in, but probably call it to order, do the Pledge of Allegiance and all that kind of stuff. And then hopefully by then he'll have gotten his link and we'll have solved his access issue.
Yep. Matt, are you with us or it's hard to tell?
Yeah, I know. I'm here. Sorry.
Okay. Let's call the meeting to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
You can, and I'll take you in the order on my screen, which is Commissioner Carlson,
Present?
Commissioner Callahan,
present.
Commissioner Krazan,
President?
Commissioner Walters,
Here.
Commissioner Kilroy,
Here.
Commissioner Bauer,
Present.
and Chair Light.
Here. Okay, salute to the flag. Matt, would you mind leading us in the salute to the flag?
My pleasure. You all put your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Okay, with that.
I apologize. Somehow I got muted and I wasn't meant to.
I think we heard you.
We heard you.
We heard everybody else if you didn't. We followed your lips.
There we go.
Let's see, can I get a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
Yeah, so moved.
Second?
Okay, anybody opposed? Okay. Let's go down to, let's see, the blue folder items. I had checked that and there was nothing in it. Has anything popped in since about 5 o'clock?
Nope, no blue folders for you this evening, Chair.
Okay, the consent calendar. Let's see, approval of the affidavit of posting and the approval of the minutes. Does anybody want to pull either of those items?
Nope.
Okay, can I get a motion?
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second. Anybody opposed? Okay, next item. Public participation on non-agenda items. Do we get, I checked before, I didn't see any e-comments or emails. Has there been any since?
We did get one e-comment under this topic, Chair Light, and I can read that into the record for you. It's from a gentleman named Ivan Goldman, and his comment is, apparently the city council may discuss where to place pallet shelters for the homeless. The answer is obvious, Beverly Hills. That's the end of the comment.
Okay, any other online comments?
That's the only one we have. Let me just check my email real quick. I don't believe we've received any in the meantime. No, Chair, that's all we have.
And is anybody live that wants to speak to this item?
Mark is now in attendance. Mark, if you would like to speak on non-agenda item, could you raise your hand and let us know? Otherwise, we could move on to the next agenda item. All right, seeing no hand raised, I think you're good to go, Chair Light.
Okay, any ex parte communications about any of the agenda items that we'll be discussing tonight? Negative. Okay, no public hearings, no items continued from previous agendas. So we're into section L, items for discussion prior to action. And the first is L1, the discussion regarding the request for proposals for a public amenities plan for King Harbor.
Great, thank you, Chair Light. What I wanted to do tonight is just to give the commission an update on where we are in the process and provide an opportunity if you have any questions that you'd like to have answered. As you know, we started this process back in January to issue the request for proposals. The RFP came to you on a couple of occasions to get your comments and then was presented to the City Council in March of this year. And ultimately that was released out to the consultant community. We as staff targeted our research to direct solicitation of the RFP. And I think, as I have mentioned before, we sent that out to about 18 different consultants, which were a composition of either solo engineering firms, solo landscape architects, and in some cases there are firms that are multidisciplinary firms that have in-house capacity for both of those kinds of disciplines for planning and engineering services. We posted the RFP on LinkedIn, the American Planning Association RFP Marketplace, the city's website. So we really attempted to try to get a broad distribution of the RFP out into the professional community. And based on those, we got some additional inquiries and distributed 8 additional copies of the RFP. So I think we total had about 26 different distributions of the RFP out on the street from people we either directly solicited or who contacted our office for a copy of the RFP. As you may recall, those responses to the RFP were due on May 24th, and we got 5 responses from the following teams. One was from CMG Landscape Architecture, and their partner on the proposal was Moffitt & Nichol, a marine engineering firm. The second was from Groundworks Office, and they were partnered with Anchor QEA. The third was from Hirsch & Associates, also partnered with Anchor QEA. The The fourth was from Moore, Rubel, Udell, and they were partnered with Somas as their engineering partner. They also had some other members of their team. And then we also got one from SWA, who was partnered with Anchor QEA. As you may recall, I'm not sure if it was our last meeting, it might have been the meeting before, you designated the chair of the Harbor Commission to sit on the selection panel along with representatives from our office, Public Works, and Community Development to review the proposals. And that took place, at which point there were 3 firms that were selected to participate in oral interviews. We conducted those oral interviews on June 28th and June 29th, and then the selection committee had a follow-up meeting to discuss the teams, discuss the proposals, and based on that, there was a unanimous selection of the SWA team for recommendation to the City Council. Prior to doing that, we have to initiate the contract and scope of work negotiation process. We've already sent them our boilerplate contract that we use for vendors here in the city, and they have that and are reviewing that right now. We will be discussing the scope of work with them. We didn't have a lot of changes to that scope, so I think that will go fairly smoothly, but we will look at that with them and make sure that we all agree on that final scope of work. And then our expectation is that we would take the recommendation to the City Council at their August 10th meeting. Now, I just learned today, which I didn't know, and we will have to look at the calendar again to revisit the date. There's a possibility that that August 10th meeting will be the makeup meeting for the meeting they were supposed to have tomorrow night, where they were going to do interviews for commission members. So when the City Council meeting last week got canceled due to technical difficulties, it got moved to tomorrow night, and that pushed off their interview process to a later date. I thought they were going to do that as a standalone meeting outside of their normal calendar, but there was some discussion today that that might happen on August 10th. If it does, they had requested that we not put anything else on the agenda for that evening, which may ultimately then push this item to the following City Council meeting, which would be August 17th. So we'll know a little bit more about that as we get deeper into the scheduling process, and probably learn more about that on Wednesday morning as well, when we have our next department head meeting. So that's a little bit of a TBD in terms of when we can get that on their calendar, but our expectation is it will happen in August. We're just not sure which meeting that's going to happen at. So we'll make sure that goes forward with them. And then, and just by way of information, you know, the funding for that contract, there was a decision package that was included in this year's budget cycle. It was for approximately $300,000. That decision package was approved by the City Council. So the funding for this contract has already been contained within this upcoming fiscal year budget that was approved by the council on the 22nd of June. So that concludes my update. Like I said, we just really wanted to give you an update on where we are in the process. We really appreciated Chair's light participation. I think it was helpful to have a representative of the Harbor Commission on the selection panel so that we can make the recommendation to the City Council with that input. Typically, sometimes these processes, we issue an RFP and then we make a recommendation straight to the City Council. So it was good to have that recommendation in that, or the chair's participation in that process. So happy to answer any questions you might have on the process. This was really an update item to let you know where we are. We've already selected the working group. So as soon as we get that contract to the City Council and executed, we would expect to be able to start very shortly afterward on the initial scope of work in terms of background gathering, some of the starting meetings with the working committee, et cetera. So if you have any particular questions on this item, I'm happy to tackle them. Chair Light, I don't know if you want to add any insight onto the selection process. But
yeah, I'll add a little bit. First of all, I appreciate being invited to be part of that. I think that was valuable to gain that insight and read the different proposals. When we went through the written proposals, we actually were going, there was 3 different choices for who was up front, and then but it was pretty unanimous who the top 3 were going to be. And then once we did the orals, there was one that rose to the top, and it was unanimous amongst all of us. So it was a very open and collaborative process. And We met a little in between and after, kind of hot washed each of the things. And the process was very collaborative, and I was very pleased with the results.
Oops. So you do have a hand up, Chair Light.
Okay, Roger, it's off the top of my screen, so I can't
Yeah.
see that.
Thanks. Sorry about that. In going through the process, do you have any feeling at this point about schedule or how the splitting of parts between the main amenities and Moonstone might work out?
So the proposal for this particular firm was very clear that they were going to try to adhere to your recommended schedule, which was to complete the scope of work within 6 months, with the last 3 months being reserved out for various hearings with the Harbor Commission, City Council, for review of the plan itself. This particular firm was one of the few firms that actually, I believe, Jim, if I recall right, actually called out the Moonstone Park planning process as a separate scope of work and was very detailed in terms of being able to move that on a parallel track. So I think we would be in good shape in terms of that moving along at the same time. So I think the team felt comfortable, the review panel felt comfortable that they could accomplish that and meet the timeline associated with the project once we've got to contract execution.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Uh-huh.
Nothing else.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, do we have any public comment?
I do see Commissioner Krazan has her hand up.
Oh, okay, that just popped. So I apologize, if you're at the top of my screen, somehow the Zoom header cuts off the hand, so I can't see it.
I'll try to let you know as well.
Okay, thanks. So Leslie?
No worries. Just thinking ahead to when they're on contract and kickoff, it would help the subcommittee to know or to be provided the specific reference documents that they either got with the RFP or that they'll get at the kickoff, so we can see if there's any gaps or, just get the lay of the land of what they've had exposure to.
Sure.
That's all.
Thank you.
So Director Proud, do you plan to send out their proposal and send folks the link to the site that they had access to?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. The proposal, I could send that around to the Harbor Commission I think that'd be a good idea, maybe as so you're all familiar with the team and who they are and the scope of work that's being proposed and a little bit of background on their team. The SWA team, they were one of the few firms that, a little bit of a larger firm, they're kind of a multi-office firm. They have a presence, a large national presence. They did construct their team a little differently, and what I thought was favorable on their team was they not only had themselves as the prime, and then they had Anchor QEA, who appeared, as you can see, appeared on 3 different proposals as their marine consultant. But they also have on their team an organization called Cummings, which is a cost estimating firm, which I think the team felt was very beneficial as we go through the planning process to have an iterative process with a cost estimator who can make sure that we're, having an understanding of some of the improvements that are being proposed and the cost estimates that go along with that. They have a public outreach component on their team and then a building assessment person on their team. So it's a 5-entity team, but all very well coordinated and organized through the scope of work. So what I'll do tomorrow is I will send you an electronic version. So hopefully the file won't be too big. I'll send you an electronic version of the RFP response that they sent in, as well as the link to the information that currently is sitting on file right now on Dropbox. So you'll have all of that information. And those of you on the working committee, that'll allow you to get a little bit of a head start to look through some of that information as we get started on the process.
And you can see their proposed schedule in there. It's fairly detailed. But, obviously the start date shifting to the left, to the right. So you can kind of get from their start date, where they're moving, where they plan to move forward. I will say they were the most complete. Having written proposals for the government, they answered everything very well and very clearly. And their orals presentation, I think, rose above everybody else we listened to. So it was, to me, it was an obvious choice, but it was also a consensus amongst everybody. So, yes, Vicki.
Are they local?
They do have a Los Angeles office among
Okay.
other offices. They do. And their LA team is obviously the team that's assigned to this scope of work. We took a fair amount of time to try and link the things that they showed as their experience for this work. We asked them in the oral interviews to make sure we could link the staff to the projects so that we knew we were getting the staff that had worked on some of those previous projects. So
I think that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, they do have a local LA presence and have worked on projects in Marina del Rey and Santa Monica and some of the other coastal areas.
Good.
And QEA is local as well.
QEA is local as well, yes.
And they have Trisha Miracala's marketing, whatever you call it, branding firm.
Yeah, community outreach and
Yep.
information, and she's a local Redondo Beach resident.
Yep.
So good representation.
All right.
So the chair, for this one, all we really need from you is really a receive and file of the report, a motion to receive and file the report.
Nothing from the public?
We have one member of the public attending. No hand is up for them. I will take one last look and see if we've received any e-comments. Let me refresh my screen. And we have not received any e-comments, so no comments on this particular item.
Okay, so do I have a motion to receive and file?
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
Okay, does anybody opposed? Okay. Going to L2, the discussion and possible action regarding the City of Redondo Beach fiscal year 21-22 budget and fiscal year 21 to 26 capital improvement program.
Thank you, Chair. So for this is really another update item for you tonight, but wanted to make sure we took the time to, after you did a lot of work at your June meeting, provided comments to the City Council regarding the budget, wanted to make sure we circled back with you and recap the budget adoption process and the budget that was actually adopted. As you know, that process takes place throughout the course of the month of June, and ultimately the budget was adopted on June 22nd. Focusing in on the harbor enterprise, our baseline budget as we proposed it to the City Council was adopted as proposed. And as you'll recall from our meeting on the June 2nd meeting, there were several decision packages that were related to the harbor enterprise. And the City Council approved all of those decision packages. There were 8 of them. They approved 6 of the 8, and the 2 decision packages that were not approved, that's kind of the way we are approaching this, were the Public Works Department budget reduction and the Fire Department administrative support staff reduction. And with regard to the Public Works budget reduction, what the City Council did was they restored, there were 3 positions that were the subject of that particular decision package. And what the City Council did was they restored funding for 2 of those positions. One is a building maintenance worker and the other is a maintenance worker 1 position. They continued the freeze on the 3rd position, which is a public services lead worker position. So I think this is a good news item in the sense that they were originally going to freeze 3 positions. They decided not to do that. They decided to fund 2 of those and only freeze a single position. So that will allow us to have a little more public works support staff down at the pier for the upcoming year. The second was decision package 32, which would have reduced funding as a result of reorganization of the fire department administrative support staff. They denied that request largely due to the fact that there is an anticipated much larger discussion yet to be had about the citywide fire inspection program. And so I think the city council wants to have that conversation before they revisit some of the staffing questions for the fire department itself. So those two decision packages were not approved as proposed, and not approved is not necessarily a bad thing, as you can see. With regard to the capital improvement budget, you may recall that our capital improvement budget included 3 new projects within the harbor. The first was some design money for the replacement of the hand launch dock or some other type of hand launch facility if we were to go to a zero depth entry, for example. The second was the installation of parking lot pay stations in the Redondo Beach Marina. This is really important to us, and we talked about it last year as part of the budget because we currently have a warm body that sits in our gate at the Redondo Beach Marina, and people pull tickets and then they pay. It's a very expensive operation for us to have that person in there. And so what we'd like to do is go to automated pay stations and eliminate that particular labor cost for operating the parking lot itself. We've done a lot of legwork on this in the last year, so I'm optimistic that we'll be able to move into implementation fairly quickly this year on this particular capital improvement project. And then the last, which is a relatively small project, is the resurfacing of Turtle Park, which is a little small park up above the International Boardwalk. Not everybody knows exactly where that is, but it has a play surface on there that's deteriorated over the years that needs to be resurfaced. So those were the only 3 new projects that we have in our capital improvement plan, all approved by the city council. We still, as you know, have a whole host of ongoing capital improvement projects that the Public Works Department is continuing to work on. So we have carryover money that would be continuing to move forward and allow us to move forward with that. And that includes the replacement of the harbor patrol docks and harbor dredging work, which I know you've seen at previous meetings. What was interesting about the budget process is that the city, at the same time we were discussing the budget, there was a parallel discussion that was happening related to the city's unfunded accrued liability obligation for CalPERS. The city every year contributes money to CalPERS to help offset the fact that CalPERS is not getting as high a return as they anticipate on their investments. And it's what's called an unfunded accrued liability for each local jurisdiction that they have to pay back into CalPERS. What the city did this year was they decided to issue a bond to pay off the unfunded accrued liability. And why that matters and why I've digressed on that topic a little bit is because of the way that the bond is structured and the debt service payments associated with that bond, it freed up a little bit of money this year for the city council to start to do some other things with that cash. And what that means for the harbor in particular is that there were some items that were included in the budget motion that frankly I wasn't anticipating and didn't know were coming, but are positive developments, I think, for the harbor overall. First is a $1 million allocation for Seaside Lagoon. And to be more precise on your staff report, that is a $1 million total allocation to Seaside Lagoon, with $500,000 of that coming from the general fund, this savings that was realized from this unfunded accrued liability, and a reallocation of $500,000 from the Moonstone Park set aside to Seaside Lagoon. The second item was $100,000 for the Mold D marquee sign. And the Mold D marquee sign that we're talking about is as you enter the Redondo Beach Marina parking lot where that parking booth is that has the person in it, there's a very large sign there that lists a lot of the businesses and activities that you can, that are located inside the Redondo Beach Marina. There has been some conversation from the King Harbor Association about partnering with the city on an upgrade to that marquee sign. We're starting that process by replacing some of the signage for some of the tenants that we've lost, like Ruby's and Polly's on the pier. And we're gonna replace that signage with new signage. And we're gonna do that as just an initial first step. But there's a bigger move to try to improve the marquee, which may include the opportunity to incorporate an electronic sign. Now, for that to occur, the staff would have to come back to the city council with a change to the municipal code to allow electronic signs, because those are currently prohibited in the city with the exception of a few locations like the Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center. So the city council put $100,000 aside for that MOLD marquee sign effort, but there will still need to be some legwork before we can move forward with expending that money. And then finally, there was an additional allocation of $400,000 to renovate pier bathrooms. I can tell you this is certainly a welcome allocation for our office, as perhaps one of the biggest complaints we get on a regular basis is the quality and the condition of the bathrooms down in the waterfront. And that $400,000 was broken up as $100,000 for the bathrooms next to the bike path in the garage, $200,000 for the bathrooms on the International Boardwalk, and $100,000 for the bathrooms next to Pad 10. Now, what's interesting about this is we are looking at an opportunity. You may know where the bathrooms are right next to Quality Seafood. They're under the stairwell. We're looking at an opportunity to perhaps relocate bathrooms and take some of the space that was previously occupied by the Fun Factory and see if we can incorporate a whole new bathroom with an exterior entry to that space and ultimately get rid of the bathrooms that are underneath that stairwell. They're very difficult for us to look at as a renovation to make them ADA compliant. And so what we'd rather do is really just completely take those out of service and create a brand new bathroom facility utilizing some of the space that was previously the Fun Factory space. Obviously, our public works program is a big program. We have a lot of stuff that's currently ongoing. We just now had 3 new projects that we proposed and then 3 more allocations that were provided to us by the city council. So we're going to have to work with the public works department to establish some priorities for these projects and kind of set up a work plan for the upcoming year. There's no direction that we necessarily need from the Harbor Commission at this time. We did set this up as a discussion and possible action just in case some of this new information to you would engender some kind of action on your part. And we're looking for you to receive and file the report and provide us direction as appropriate. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Hopefully I'll be able to answer them. I will tell you it was a long evening and there were 3 different competing budget motions that were on the table at one particular time that all ended up having to get reconciled. So if you have a particular question, I may have to dig into my email and pull up that budget report so I can tell you for certain what's on there. So with that, happy to take any questions you might have.
So I was particularly disappointed to see that we're reallocating $500K from Moonstone Park to Seaside Lagoon. I don't think we should be raiding one park to pay for another. And while I know the license agreement with Chevron never formally stated that money had to go into MOL-B, every staff report since then has discussed using those funds for the MOL-B master plan. And in fact, there was one where at one point, the estimated cost of Moonstone Park, the renovations to do the plan was $2.1 million. And that was in 2013. We know that's, those prices have gone up since then. So I question whether the 2.4 million that we have today will even cover the old Moonstone Park plan. And I'm disappointed to see that we're allocating money away. It was actually 2.7 million total, but 300K of the Chevron monies was for administrative costs and 2.4 was in every staff report I read from 2012 on was for MOL-B and Moonstone Park. So what they did was this is an allocation, but not an obligation?
Well, it was an approved part of the budget motion. I can tell you there wasn't a lot of backup or discussion in terms of exactly what the $1 million was for. As as you may know, and you may have alluded to previously, we are looking to secure additional money for the redevelopment of Moonstone Park. Obviously, that's one of the big pieces of the public amenities plan. And I know we've been in contact with legislature offices that we work with and legislators that we work with and are looking to get some allocation of money to that. So it's unclear to me at this time whether that $1 million is to help some of that new work that's going to happen in Seaside Lagoon, or if it's intended for any other kinds of work that may happen inside of the lagoon. It wasn't spelled out in the budget motion. It just, what you have on my staff report is almost word for word what was written in the budget motion itself with not much additional detail.
But does what they passed audit, does that fence it off and we can't put it back into Moonstone Park unless the council does something?
I think they would have to go back and undo the motion that they made, because the motion was to allocate that money that was previously set aside for Mold B, Moonstone Park, to see a Seaside Lagoon project, whatever that might be.
Okay, well, I'm gonna call on the rest of them before I do. I want to hear everybody else talk on this. So I couldn't see whether Matt or Vicky was up first. So
I think
Doesn't
I
matter
was.
to me.
Yeah. I'll go. I was going to reiterate the fact that we started with 2.7 million from the Coker project, and the city took 300,000 for administrative, which left us with 2.4. Now we're taking another $500,000 out. So we're going to be down to 1.9. This is kind of like the federal government taking money out of Social Security to put in the general fund so that it looks better, while we're slowly defunding something else. I have a real hard time with defunding one thing to finance something else. You need to find funds for that project somewhere else. So that's my 2 cents.
okay, Matt.
Well, I basically wanted to kind of echo the same point. It's the one thing I keyed on when I was looking at that. And this kind of goes back to what happens when you have turnover in elected offices. There's nobody on that council, with the exception of the mayor, who was around at the time the whole Coker project from Chevron happened. And that money was specifically donated. And Commissioner Chair Light, I guess you're right. I haven't actually read or seen the agreement with Chevron, but it was our understanding that that was specifically designated for Moonstone Park. It's certainly not in word. It certainly was in, call it a handshake agreement. There was discussion back then about whether it could be allocated for other areas. And we were basically told, no, it couldn't be, or that kind of went against the agreement with Chevron. So it's amazing to me what happens when years go by and institutional knowledge fades, or it becomes a matter of convenience for some particular people to shift money around rather than honor the agreement that was made with Chevron in the first place. I think it sends a bad message for the city of Redondo Beach making agreements with private entities with, yeah, this is what the money's going to be used for, and then all of a sudden it's not. I can think of a few other examples where I question what's happened to that money, but that's for another date. Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Callahan and Chair Light that the rating of the money that was specifically designated for Moonstone Park to be used for anything else is a slippery slope and should not be allowed to happen. I don't know why the mayor didn't step in and bring this up, but yeah, it's certainly something I would hope they would revisit. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. I see Tom, you have your hand raised. You're on mute, Tom.
Yes, but although I was one of the last ones to raise, but what can we do about this? I am also a bit aghast at this just carte blanche moving money around. Director Proud, what can be done at this point?
So I would have won $1 million had I been able to place a bet on this particular agenda item because I had a very strong suspicion you would all react in the way you're reacting. And which is also why I set this up as a discussion and possible action item. So, you know, and Chair Light may have it, I had a sense he was going to come back to this once he had heard from all of the commission members. You know, I don't have a specific recommendation. The budget's been approved by the city council, but I suspect you might want to send a communication to the city council as kind of a post-budget communication that you've had an opportunity to review it, and that perhaps you'd like for them to revisit the funding decision that was made for Seaside Lagoon and for them to reconsider their decision to pull money out of the Moonstone Park account to help fund the Seaside Lagoon work, as I said, whatever that might be. So, but I'm going to probably leave it to you all to, I don't have a specific recommendation on what you could do. I mean, it's a budget motion that was passed and adopted by the city council. So I think it's, you know, the action for you is maybe to just come behind that and provide your thoughts and recommendations to the city council, perhaps draft a letter to them that we could send to them on your behalf. Some of you may have other ideas on how you want to address this issue, but I did set it up as an action item for you for this specific reason, because I had a strong suspicion you might want to do something.
Well, thank you. No, I definitely think we should do something about it. Or try to.
Anything else, Tom?
No, thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you. Let's see, Roger?
Thanks. So I'll throw my head in as well. I'm also aghast and against this. And I'm also kind of disappointed they did it right now. Like we have a funded plan for Moonstone Park. We're starting an amenities plan, and they kind of directed us to split Moonstone Park off, accelerate it, do it separately, keep it on a parallel path, do it as quickly as possible. And then to take 500 from it right now, well, you know, on the one hand, I hope we could get that 500 back after we get through a little bit down the road with the amenities plan and we know what we're really doing and what it's actually going to cost in today's dollars, you know. But why steal from Moonstone Park now today is, you know, I like Seaside Lagoon too, but is it on fire? I mean, is there also, what's the plan for the $1 million in Seaside Lagoon? Is it, you know, bathrooms or some other upgrade? What was the urgency there to take from Moonstone for, you know, take from a defined plan from Moonstone and move it to, as far as I know, an undefined plan in Seaside Lagoon?
Yeah, I can't really, I wish I could give you more background. We found out about it the night that the council made the motion. So it wasn't, I can tell you it wasn't anything that our office, you know, said, hey, why don't you got some extra money left over from this work you're doing on these unfunded accrued liabilities. You know, what do you want to do with it? We wouldn't have made that recommendation. And in fact, when the mayor contacted me and wanted to talk about the capital improvement program, I told him if I had any money that I had left to spend, it would be to continue the program of replacing the docks in Basin 3, as I consider that to probably be our most dire need at the moment, given the condition of the docks. And I'm concerned about somebody putting a foot through a deck board and, you know, the liability associated with it. So we have a lot of work in our capital improvement program that we haven't even completed yet. And so the idea of having a project to me was going to be a challenge. But, you know, like I said, when the budget motion came out, it really was, you know, $1 million for Seaside Lagoon and half of it from the general fund and half of them from this. I would assume over the next few weeks, now that the budget has been passed, we'd talk a little bit more about what the intent of that money was for. Like I said, it could have been to help seed the Seaside Lagoon work that will emerge from the public amenities plan. Could be that money could be used for some other project within Seaside Lagoon. I'm not aware of anything that is immediate that would require immediate funding. It would be, you know, the only thing I can think of is just sort of general maintenance activities, but there may be some water quality issues or some things that I'm not aware of, but nothing that immediately comes to my mind, Commissioner Carlson.
So I have some insight into
Thanks.
that from some correspondence with one of the council members, but I'm afraid if I reveal it, it would be a Brown Act violation. So I don't know. I'm not positive on that, but I'm just wary about revealing something one council person stated and the other council persons could hear it. And I guess this is a public session, so I don't know. I need guidance on that.
I'm not sure I can help you with that one. But yeah, our office wasn't consulted ahead of time, so I just apologize. I don't have a lot of insight into it yet in terms of what the intent of the funding was actually for.
So I'm not sure who still has their hand raised and who might come after me. And I'm not going to tee this up as a motion, but maybe I'll tee this up as a motion. But I'd suggest that we take the Moonstone 500 and either move it back to Moonstone or put it in limbo or freeze it until the amenities plan is a little further along and we know where money ought to be spent. And then we take that 500 that is available to be spent and, Director Proud, use it for the most urgent needs somewhere which could actually be spent in the next 6 months. And I wouldn't be spending money on Moonstone or even Seaside Lagoon in the next 6 months because we've got the amenities plan coming. I could be wrong, but maybe there is some urgency in one of those parks or somewhere else in the harbor I'm not aware of. But it seems foolish to waste $1 million when the amenities plan is finally moving. Not a motion, just an early discussion at this point.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Anything else, Roger?
That's it. Thanks.
Okay, let's see. Leslie, I think you were next.
Sure. Just echoing what everyone else said here, that it doesn't seem right to move for the residents as well as corporations that we partner with to then change the game without kind of buy-in from those parties. And I am confused about, it seems like the only thing would have been an urgent need, but yet no one knows what the urgent need was. And I do find the timing really, really strange, since not too long ago, the council was saying, we've got this slam dunk, let's go after this piece, and gave us direction. We have a contract coming in the fall here. And yeah, I agree we should do a letter kind of reiterating all of that, and in the very least freezing that money until the plan is formulated. On the bathrooms that you mentioned, Fun Factory possibilities, would that fall under the amenities plan consideration for recommendations that they may have that could, possibly be more than just a replace in a new location, but things that may come out of the amenities plan? Does that fall in there?
It could. It probably depends on how much detail the amenities plan goes into. There's been a lot of conversation here at the commission level about, how deep do we go into the details or open scale of some of the projects. So if we ultimately get to that level of detail, that certainly could be one of the conversations that could happen. Our plan right now is the funding that was in the budget was really for refurbishment of existing bathrooms that we currently have. I only raised that one just as a notion that we are continuing to look for ways to try to upgrade the bathrooms, because we do understand that is just an issue that is a fundamental issue for someone who's coming to visit the pier, is the cleanliness and the quality of the bathrooms.
Yeah. Does the timing of the replacement of that particular set kind of work well with the amenities plan schedule, or could that come in advance?
Yeah, you mean the Fun Factory piece?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a down the road kind of project. And ideally what we would do is, maybe if there were a tenant, let's say, that was going into the Fun Factory space, we had a tenant that we could re-tenant that space with, would be to try to work with them to, maybe as part of their improvement of that facility, figure out a way to incorporate the bathroom into that work program. So yeah, I think that's certainly not something that we have on the drawing board. Our first immediate work on the bathrooms, just so you all are aware, is we have been spending probably more time than we would like to try to get a bathroom project approved for the bathrooms that are out at the end of the pier. We believe that the Public Works Department has plans and specs that they're going to be bringing to the City Council shortly to do that upgrade. So that will be the first project out. And then the monies that have been allocated as part of the budget will come back and we'll look at some of those bathrooms and upgrades there. The ones that I was talking about at the Fun Factory would absolutely be after we've gone through the public amenities planning process.
Okay. That's all.
Anything else? Okay, thanks, Leslie. I would postulate that if the subcommittee and the contractor are getting to the point of placing bathrooms, we're going to run out of budget and we're going to go over schedule. Because that's a lot of details, and really that's more project level than amenities.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking if they came forward with as part of that an amenity to add like showers or something, then that's a like larger space that they might suggest. That's all.
Yeah. Let's see, Vicky, did you re-raise your hand or is that?
I did. I was getting to the motion point, but.
Well, before we go to motion, I'd like to hear from the public, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Did you have anything else you wanted to?
No.
Okay. Anybody else want to speak before we open it up to the public? Leslie, did you re-raise your hand or? Oh, it just went away. Okay. So I would imagine this is what Mark dialed in.
Yeah, you do have one attendee. Mark would like to talk on this. I'm going to click his button to allow him. Mark, you should be able to unmute yourself and be able to talk now.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mark Hansen here, King Harbor Boater. First off, I want to thank our waterfront director for highlighting this to the commission and to the public. This certainly snuck by me. I was watching the budget process fairly carefully, and I did not know about this until I saw the admin report that the waterfront director provided to you. Of course, I'm very, very disappointed in this intent to raid the MOLB master plan funds. By now, I think most of you know that voters have a huge history in this. Basically, we created that MOLB master plan. I formed a MOLB subcommittee. I had members of the Outrigger Canoe Clubs, the city sailing instructors, and other voters on that committee. We worked on it for 4 years. We had 2 volunteer architects, one from the Outrigger Canoe Clubs and one from the city sailing program. I lobbied the council to get $30,000 in funding to work on the MOLB master plan. They hired a landscape architect, nice young fellow, worked very closely with us. And essentially he would draw something, we'd explain to him why the way we drew it was probably better. He would acknowledge that and change his drawing. He did this 3 times until essentially we paid him $30,000 to redraw our drawing. From the funding standpoint, our involvement was started when the public relations rep from Chevron approached me at a city council meeting and asked if the voters would support delaying the implementation of the MOLB project until they could do the Coker Drum project. I worked very, very closely with Chevron. I helped introduce them all around the city and the harbor. I promoted all of the community meetings for them. And I had to do some work calming down some voters because some voters' knee-jerk reaction was, oh, this is going to stop us from getting to our boats and going down the channel. And I was able to calm everybody down and basically get universal support from the boating community. I also arranged to have a big community presentation at King Harbor Yacht Club. After all that time that I and the voters have put in, I got to tell you, I'm pretty insulted that this would even be contemplated. And I think it's very insulting to Chevron because, as a couple of you have already said, yeah, there was no doubt about this. Chevron said over and over, this money was supposed to be used for the recreational facilities on MOLB. A couple of you have reflected on the timing, and yeah, it's pretty amazing to think for 9 years, we've all said, okay, we got, 2.7 left, or 2.4 left. We've said it over and over and over, and all of a sudden now, just months before we're ready to finally work on it, the funds get raided. A little sidebar, I want to point out that for ever, we called it the Moleby Master Plan because the master plan was for the whole thing from the north to the south, including the Guthrie's property, because they were working very closely. Sean was a big part of the whole process, Sean Guthrie. I don't know why once in a while people would try to rename it and call it the Moonstone Park Project. Moonstone Park's one little rectangle of grass. This Moleby Master Plan is for the whole thing. I want to point out, as far as there was some talk about, how much money we have left and how much this might cost. The last really substantive meeting we had on the Moleby Master Plan was after the Guthries decided against the big 2-story boating and sailing center. We had a meeting to say, okay, how do we want to modify things if we're not going to have the building? And Al Ching, founder of the Outrigger Canoe Clubs, one of his big suggestions was because we couldn't have a ramp for the outriggers jutting out in the navigable channel, he said, well, how about a subtraction where we cut into the mole so we can start the slope inside of the mole. The waterfront director at the time, Pete Carmichael, commented, well, boy, that's a lot more expensive. And when I said, yeah, but we got 2.4 million left, he says, oh, you're right. We could do this right and have a nice subtraction with it inside. At any rate, pardon me, no surprise to you, I'm going to strongly support what some of the other commissioners, in fact, I think almost all of you have already said, is for you guys to write a letter to the city council, kind of re-educate them. As somebody said, yeah, most of them weren't around back then, so we can forgive them a little bit for not knowing the history, but I think you guys are in the great position to give them some history, education, give them some context, and ask them to please reinstate that money back to the Moleby Master Plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, does anybody want to take a shot at a motion? Vicki, it sounded like you were ready.
Well, actually, I really liked what Roger Carlson said. He kind of encompassed everything I was going to say. So if he could restate his pre-motion, I really liked his phraseology.
Well, I was hoping you were going to come up with better words, Vicki.
Well, before we do that, let me jump out of turn and interject. I support, a letter or whatever we move to do to ask the council to reconsider. I personally think we have to strongly state that it has to be put back into Moonstone Park, not
frozen.
Other stuff. That's my personal. That's the way I would vote. But
Jim, do you object to setting it aside and freezing it until a later date, or do you want it definitely just put back?
I'd prefer it put back. We can always, you can always move it later if the park comes in under 2.1 million. But I can't imagine after that 2013 meeting where they estimated the cost at 2.1 million, I don't think it went down unless we're going to start eroding what that park's going to be.
Well, after they take 500,000 out, we only have 1.9 million.
That's my point. That's why I want to just keep as much as we can over there.
All right.
That's my personal, Tom, you get.
Yeah, and I would second that also, that I think it should be put back just from the standpoint that we have a donor that thought it was going for this particular cause, and now it gets moved around. It doesn't seem right. I think it needs to go back to. It's one thing if we end up spending less on the project that we need, and then we can allocate that money. But I think the money should go back to what it was originally intended for.
Okay. Hearing
Sorry,
all that.
Jump on the whole motion thing there. So I think Roger, you had
you tee up a volleyball, it gets batted around. So let's try this. A motion in two parts. First part regarding the Moonstone 500K. We move that back to Moonstone Park where it was for three reasons. One, the money came from Chevron and was intended for Moonstone Park. Two, we have an existing plan for Moonstone Park, which cost $2.3 million in 2012 dollars. Help me with the numbers.
It was estimated at 2.1 million in 2013 dollars.
And the third reason being that we have an amenities plan in work today. And perhaps a fourth reason being that we have no urgent need in Moonstone Park.
No,
You mean in Seaside Lagoon?
Sorry, in
Seaside Lagoon,
Seaside
yeah.
Lagoon. And then the second half of the motion would be, we suggest that the 500K, the other 500K be put into, urgent needs that can actually be spent in 2021.
And would that be urgent needs for Seaside Lagoon? Because the money was being dedicated to Seaside Lagoon. So is the motion, the other 500K would be spent on any urgent needs that have emerged inside of relative to Seaside Lagoon? Are you just sort of saying more broadly 500,000 to just go back to any other harbor-wide urgent need?
Well, let me ask a question. That extra 500K was from that bond reference, correct?
Correct. So the city has been able to reduce our first year by issuing this debt to cover the unfunded accrued liability for CalPERS. What the city was previously thought they were going to have to spend was reduced because of this new debt service that's being issued. And so that resulted in some additional dollars being available to the city council for allocation. The budget motion basically said, and 450,000 other funds to balance these funds, and the remainder going following CIP projects. And that was the remainder of whatever was left over. And then there's a laundry list of projects, one of which is the Seaside Lagoon project.
Yeah. Well, personally, I'm okay with that money going towards Seaside Lagoon, but I do have some knowledge that I don't feel comfortable. I asked for it directly to a councilman's public email address, but I don't understand the nuances of the Brown Act with respect to revealing something outside of the council's, public discussion on this, and the fact that we're in a public discussion. I'm actually okay with other 500K.
Err on the side of caution.
Yeah, so I'm not going to say anything. But Roger, I think the action I think we have to agree on a direction, but the motion, I think, would be more appropriate to form a subcommittee to actually write the letter, unless we expect the crowd to translate this from us tonight.
Well, I think we're pretty close to writing it tonight, and I'd rather write it now than a month from now.
Yes.
Because if there's 500, this is a tight year. If there's 500K available to be spent on something in 2020, I'd like to spend it in 2020 and, do what we can for the pier and the businesses there and the people down there. So the thing that made me not tag that money for Seaside Lagoon was, in our discussion 15 minutes ago, we couldn't identify any urgent need in Seaside Lagoon. So, if there's a more urgent need to fix the docks in the marina, or, I would rather see it spent on something that would attract people to the harbor area. If the skate park is missing money, if that could accelerate the skate park, if it could do something for, outdoor dining on the pier, or, a nice uniform design for outdoor dining along the International Boardwalk instead of a mishmash of, picnic tables and Home Depot parts. I'd love to see that money do something good for us in 2020. So, but I'm open to suggestion here on the second half of this motion, and I hope we're pretty close to being able to write it tonight and then hand it over to Director Proud and staff and get it back to the council as soon as possible.
Well, Director Proud, if we pretty much agree on the tenets tonight and form the subcommittee, could we turn it in between meetings if we empower the subcommittee?
Sure. I think if the motion were to form a subcommittee to write the letter and authorize them to transmit it to the city council, I don't know that you necessarily, you sound like you're all in agreement on this particular topic. So I can't imagine that the letter is going to contain anything that would deviate too far from where you all currently are. So, I think you could certainly include that in the motion, have a subcommittee drafted and transmit it to the city council. That would be, for whatever it's worth, that would be my personal preference, just because I think it's stronger when it comes from you, and you all have, very strong feelings about this. And so, that would certainly be something I would support.
Well, let me ask the counterpoint. If we stay fairly succinct on this, would you be willing to translate it and send it to the?
We can do it either way, however you'd like us to do it.
Okay.
We've gotten the message in terms of, what your concerns are, so we could also draft it ourselves. Yeah.
So I will leave it back to Vicky and Roger. Vicky, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that one of our my biggest concern is that, we've got 1.9 million left after the $500,000. What else can we use it on? I want to make sure they understand that this is not an account that's open for pilfering whenever they need something that has park behind it.
Yep, I agree. Even if it's for another park.
Even if it's for another park, it's not a park fund.
Yep. Okay, so who wants to take a cut? Roger, you were in process. Do you want to?
Yeah, I was. So I guess let's have a little more discussion on that second 500. I suggested using it where the need is greatest and where it can be used in 2020. Other people were saying, send it to Seaside Lagoon. What's the sense of the room?
Well, I'd like a clarification on what it's going to be used for at Seaside Lagoon, not just here it is, use, paint the bathrooms or put new sand in. What's it going to be used for?
Well, with the Brown Act, with my Brown Act concern, I don't think we're going to hear that tonight.
No,
we're not. I certainly can't tell you because I don't know the answer to the question. The only thing I would say, and I'm not trying to sway the conversation one way or the other, is that, the council did take an action to allocate money to Seaside Lagoon, and I presume that was done because they have a rationale for allocating that money. The fact that we may not have had as much detail in the budget motion for us to know exactly what that was for. I'd like to think that if they were of the mind that it was needed, that it is needed for something. So, that may, push the conversation a little bit to hold it out for Seaside Lagoon, but that's certainly, again, you're certainly all free to decide that. I'm just going off of what they did. They felt it was important. They approved the budget motion. They allocated the money. You're looking to pull back 500,000 and stick it in the Moonstone account. Got that. The question is, do you want to honor kind of the motion and just leave the other 500 there? That's all I'm suggesting. Chair, you have a hand up, Mr. Walters.
Yes, Mr. Walters.
Yeah, I would recommend that we don't cloud the issue. Just stay focused on Moonstone. I think it's a very strong position we were making there. I do like Vicky's idea of adding to the letter that, just reminding the council that this money is set aside for that purpose. It shouldn't be pilfered from henceforth. at least a warning shot there. So although I appreciate Roger's concern, I think we should stay focused on the issue at hand. My recommendation.
Okay, who has the floor? Is it still Roger?
Yep.
It may be that I'm still writing my motion because Vicky wouldn't help me.
Vicky.
So let's make the second half of the motion that remaining 500 can be allocated to Seaside Lagoon as proposed by the council. And I'll just
But Roger, that's not our money. That didn't come out of ours.
That,
Yep.
fair enough, but it's being spent in our region,
Right?
and Seaside Lagoon is only open another 45 days. How are you
Yeah.
going to spend? This is a tight budget year. We're looking for every dollar. How are you? And if you want to help the city overall and the people of the city and the residents of the city and the visitors to the city, how are you going to spend 500 grand in Seaside Lagoon in 45 days?
Very quickly.
Are you going to give $5 to everybody that comes in the door? I mean, you know, I like Seaside Lagoon a lot. I just don't
Should
see how
we-
you spend 500 there to help
should-
us in 2020. It's
should we-
2021. I keep saying 2020.
Yeah. Should we phrase it that they need to carefully re-examine the expenditure at Seaside Lagoon? Or proposed expenditure?
Or that we hope the need in Seaside Lagoon is as urgent as other areas of the harbor.
That's a good phraseology. I like that. Can we read back what we have for a motion so far?
Yeah. I can tell you what my notes say. So my notes are a motion to move 500,000 back to the Moonstone Park account based on the fact that there was a corporate commitment from Chevron to spend the money there, that the existing plan of $2.1 million as it was priced in 2013 has certainly risen in cost and is likely to require the full 2.4 million, if not more. That we currently have an amenities plan in the works and like that to get completed before funding is being reallocated. And then the second part of that would be, and also to recommend to the city council that the $500,000 remain, or other $500,000 remain available to the Seaside Lagoon, so long as the need in Lagoon is not as urgent as perhaps any other area of the harbor.
Thanks very much for taking notes.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
And the only thing that's not there is whether you want to draft the letter as part of the, if you do, you should include that in the motion, or if you want us to draft it, you don't necessarily have to include it as part of the motion. We would just do that. You could say, direct us to draft it on your behalf, I suppose.
I'm comfortable with that.
I am as well. I'm also happy to be part of the subcommittee to write it, you know, as quickly as possible and get it out to the council. So either way there.
Well, it's your motion, so let's.
Okay.
let's-
Then I would move that we hand it off to staff and let staff write it.
Can we have Chair Light sign it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's your letter. It's not our letter. So we would definitely give it. And in fact, you know, what we would do is give it to Chair Light. And I think you could also authorize Chair Light to make any edits he deems appropriate in the letter. Undoubtedly, I won't get it perfect. There may be some stronger words he might want to use, or soften some of my language, or just change it. So I would say maybe authorize staff to prepare the letter and submit it to the chair for edits and signature.
Roger, do you want to amend your motion?
Yes. And I'll further say that, you know, I have time to write this in the next day or two. And Director Proud, you're probably busy going into council meetings and budget meetings. So if it's quicker for me and less work on your plate for me to write it, I'm happy to change that part of the motion too.
I would certainly welcome that opportunity.
Okay. Okay. Then I'll change my motion.
For that as well, if we could just.
Okay.
do it.
All right.
Okay. So we're going back to a subcommittee to draft.
Yep.
Submit.
Here's the motion. It's the words you said in the motion. It is a subcommittee, I guess, including me and possibly two other members, to draft it. Chair Light to sign it, and And Chair Light cannot make final edits unless he's part of the subcommittee. We can't have you being a fourth person, I don't think, without a Brown Act
No.
violation.
Right.
No.
So I guess then the subcommittee would include me, Chair Light, and possibly a third person.
I would like to have Matt Kilroy on because he was there when all this happened.
Matt, are you a volunteer?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay, let's add Matt's name to the motion. And
No
I think
offense to anyone, but Matt happened to be around during this whole issue.
And I think in a very long-winded, incomplete way, that concludes my motion.
Second,
Okay, any discussion on the motion before we vote? I do not see any hands up.
And for the record, we do not have any e-comments on this. I'll refresh my screen just to make sure nothing has come in. We do not have any e-comments, and the only attendee to our meeting has already spoken on this topic.
okay.
Okay, so let's do a roll call vote on this one.
All right, a roll call vote. And on the order in my screen, Commissioner Carlson,
Yes?
Commissioner Callahan,
Yes,
Commissioner Bauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Kilroy,
Yes,
Commissioner Walters,
Yes?
Commissioner Curzon,
Yes.
Chair Light,
Yes.
7-0. All right, and maybe if I could just have a motion to receive and file our report, that would be great.
motion to receive and file.
Second.
It.
Okay, anybody opposed? Okay, so we're done with that one.
Great.
Okay, now on to the discussion and possible action regarding correspondence from the Olympus Board Shop.
So my presentation on this will be fairly short, as you can see from the staff report. As you may recall, in May, we had a conversation regarding the temporary use permit process for stand-up paddleboard instruction and water sport equipment rental, the permit process for that. And as part of that, you received an email comment from Jeremy at Olympus Board Shop, and he outlined several issues for you to consider. One of the things that happened at that meeting was, as part of the referrals to staff, there was a referral to bring back the email to the Harbor Commission for further discussion. We attached a copy of that email to your staff report, and we're looking for direction from the commission. I did go back and read through the email again today just to sort of look at the points that Jeremy raised, and I think he was really focused on 3 points, and then I'll turn this over to you for your discussion, since this is really your referral item. But I think the 3 things that he was really focused in on was vehicle access to the road right behind Seaside Lagoon, and maybe that access to vehicles on that road, which might help some of the congestion that's happening around the hand launch facility. His second idea was the concept of perhaps putting up some racks which the SUPs could be stored behind Seaside Lagoon, as he felt like not only commercial operators, but private individuals who are using the ramp are pulling their boards out of the water and just leaning them on the handrails while they're going to get their vehicles or taking and driving back, so that was creating a storage issue. And then he had a request as part of his temporary use permit, whether he could stage some of his equipment at the end of the pier, at the end of the sport fishing pier, where there's a small section that was fenced off. So what I will tell you is we've already allowed him to do that. So that issue, I think, has gone away. We've allowed him access into that space when he's operating as part of his temporary use permit to do some storage of his equipment in that particular area. So just wanted to let you know that had happened. The last issue, he didn't really have a recommendation for this, but I think he just wanted to raise it for your attention, is all of the activity that happens on the hand launch dock itself, kids who are there, families who are there, people using it as a local swimming area. It was a real challenge for us last summer to address that issue. We had Craig Stanton from the Redondo Beach Marina working with us, Harbor Patrol, Marine Enforcement. We have kids jumping off the closed sport fishing pier, off the top of Polly's. We are really trying to stay on top of enforcement in that area, but I can tell you it's a real challenge for us. He didn't have any particular recommendations on that, but he did flag that as something that's also a challenge for them. So I really brought this to you based on the referral. It's kind of an open discussion for you. And if you'd like to make any recommendations or provide some direction to us, we're certainly open to hearing that.
Okay, thank you. So what I'd like to do is address these one by one, and then maybe after we're done discussing each of the individual points, we can come up with a motion. So the first is closing access to the public, the vehicle access to the public dock. I'm personally opposed to that, but any discussion on that?
You have lots of hands.
I see. So Vicky?
I'm opposed to that as well. First of all, I'd like to start with, I think Jeremy is so articulate and he's so professional. This was a lovely presentation. I think what he does is wonderful. I really believe that he has the best interest of paddle boarders, kayakers, water people, and the city at the center of all of his comments. 2020 was a very hard year for everybody because we were all confined. We're all looking for outlets of things to do. And I agree, not only there, but all throughout the harbor, it was congested with families swimming, people taking over, errant kids on bicycles and scooters. And it was a crazy, crazy year. I think that this year will be better. So a lot of those issues may go away. I think a presence of the Harbor Patrol would help immensely, but I totally disagree with cutting off access through that entrance. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it actually would limit some people from even using the facility. Is there the possibility, Director Proud, of just putting a sign 15-minute max?
We could look into that. Yeah. We can. Yeah, I mean, we can certainly look into that, like 15, like loading and unloading, 15, something like that. Inevitably, when we do that, it's just like all of these issues. It kind of comes down to enforcement, which is really difficult for us to do, but at least some signage might encourage people to speed things along.
And other people to egg them on to speed up. But I have seen it. I have seen it where I don't know, for whatever reason, people felt they were entitled and just parked down there for a significant amount of time. So I've witnessed it as well. Okay, let's see. Roger, Vicky, were you done?
I'm finished. Thank you. I just want to tell you that I really enjoy Jeremy's communications, and I think he's an asset.
I agree. Roger?
Yeah, so full disclosure, Jeremy Olympus taught me to stand up paddleboard. So, I appreciate them. I have to give a lot of weight to his comments. I don't use the hand launch much anymore, and I certainly didn't use it during COVID. So, if he saw a really good experience when that was closed, I have to put a lot of weight behind that. But I also know that there are people who, need to park as close as possible. There's guys with fishing kayaks that, the big, heavy fishing kayaks who want to park close. I used to go down there with a truck and trailer and a small inflatable and outboard motor in the middle of the night to dive the breakwell for lobsters. And believe me, I wanted to park as close as possible. So here's my substantive comment. How will that work if we go to the pay per spot metered parking? Because right now, you got to go in through a gate. You used to only have to pay $4 if you were using the hand launch, but you at least paid the city something. Now, if you go in there and there's the pay per spot meter and you never pull into a meter and park, you could potentially hit the hand launch for free. I kind of have no issue with that. The other thing I'm wondering is, does that mean we could open up the road at the end of the sea launch so that, or the end of the hand launch, so people could actually once again drive all the way through there and have like one-way traffic instead of backing up and turning around and you're waiting for the guy in front of you and all that?
So operationally, I would think that's, well, I guess with the new meter system, you could do that because you wouldn't have to re-enter the front gate and get another ticket.
You haven't paid yet. You drive in the front gate, you've paid nothing. You launch.
You'd have to put those wrong direction car tire punctures in there.
Yeah, you would have to figure out a way to discourage. I mean, hopefully if you had a sign at the end of it that said one way only, you wouldn't have people coming in from the other direction. But yeah, I mean, the only way you could guarantee it would be to have some kind of a physical barrier that would prevent people from coming in that direction. And it's not so much of an issue for the parking itself. If someone pulls into that lot, drives down that road, unloads their equipment, presumably they're going, unless they leave their vehicle on that road, which is what Chair Light has suggested, that some people just park there and leave it there. Not much we can really do about that unless we're going to have some mechanism to go out there and try to put some enforcement into getting them off of that particular road. In theory, they go out, they unload their equipment, they go park in a parking space, figure out how many hours they're going to go out for, pay for their parking, and then go do what they're going to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So, enforcing some kind of a no parking along that road is certainly something that, we'd like to make sure happens so that we have unobstructed access. People can get out there, unload the equipment that they need to unload, and reload when they're finished for the day. I like the idea of the one-way loop. I don't know what the restrictions are. I haven't gone out there and physically looked at what's happening between, the side of Seaside Lagoon and the Joe's Crab Shack location. I do know there's a drive aisle there. I just don't know how accessible that drive aisle is. And how.
Last I knew, it was some yellow removable bollards.
Right.
And then there's another entrance. There's an unused entrance to that parking lot near the Maestral statues.
Yes.
So you could even open that up, and then now people are looping right in, making a really nice one-way deal, because that backup, you get parked in there, and that was, that's an aggravation.
Yeah.
So you could have an ingress, but no egress from the area by the Maestral statue.
I believe that road is so narrow, you'd want people to only go one way.
Right.
There are parts of it that are wide enough that you can pass each other now, but I don't believe that's true along the whole route. So I do think we need tire traps at one point, but I think we could dramatically improve
the flow
things by actually having a flow instead of just, a clog.
Okay. Any other discussion on the closing the vehicle access?
No.
Okay. Let's go to the second one, the building racks against the Seaside Lagoon fence. I personally think that's an excellent idea. I have seen that the whole ramp going down lined up with kayaks and SUPs, and I have to think with leaning those SUPs up, it is a load on those rails, and it does. I mean, with the length of kayaks and SUPs, that fills up very quickly. So I actually like that, although I don't know if you made them big enough for skis and kayaks, would there be enough? I think there's still enough room to get by right there. It's only when you get down further that it starts to get fairly narrow. So any discussion on that one? Roger, is your hand still up or?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Any discussion on that?
No, good idea.
Okay, and then we already talked about the staging.
Yes.
That's already accomplished, so that's not an issue. Let's see, any other thing? So I did have one other point I wanted to ask you about, Director Proud. it looks like from his picture that Paddle House was advertising. Was that approved by the city?
No, and I'll be down there and taking a look at that again. I had already asked, once I got that picture, I sent it over to our marina manager and asked him if he could have that removed. So I think that was maybe a little guerrilla marketing. Yeah, that was not necessarily something that permission was asked for ahead of time. I think that was a beg for forgiveness rather than ask for permission.
And then perhaps, although it sounds like perhaps it cleaned up post-COVID, but maybe the other thing we could consider is a sign on the hand launch boat ramp itself that says it's for loading and unloading hand launch craft only, not for picnicking, not for other events where people are putting up umbrellas or tents or anything like that. People are getting pretty brazen these days.
Yeah, that is our challenge, right? I mean, like I said, we meet with our property management company every Thursday, and I can tell you for most of last summer, every single Thursday, part of the conversation was about people getting access onto the sport fishing pier, the activities at the hand launch facility. How can we continue to, try to restrict access to the sport fishing pier? How do we get Harbor Patrol down on the hand launch? And as you see in Jeremy's email, it did sort of start to lighten up a little bit once Harbor Patrol became much more actively involved. And we haven't had as much of that this summer. And it may have just been, a little bit COVID related. There wasn't a lot to do last summer. This summer, now that there are more activities open and available to some of those same folks, they may not be as engaged as they once were. So we can continue to monitor that through the Marina office. And if it seems like we're starting to see that challenge again, get the Harbor Patrol folks hopefully re-engaged in trying to clear the hand launch itself.
Okay, so what, since this isn't a CIP item or anything, can we request the city to take these actions, or what can our commission do at this point with this letter?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we would probably do is, I think we would probably have to take this back maybe as a staff item. I think I'd want to talk to the Public Works Department about particularly the sort of the access road, right? How could we make that work if there's a way to open up the other end? I have a vague recollection when I first got here about asking that question, and there were some concerns about people being able to make that right turn as you sort of make that, how many people are going to clip the fence and do some other things down there. So I think we'd have to look at it from the public works side and see what opportunities there could be. So why don't we, I don't know that you need to, if it turns out that it needed to be something more, it's more involved than we think, then it might be, we bring it back to you and it's a recommendation to add it to the capital improvement plan. I mean, if we think it's going to be that kind of a project, hopefully.
I'd like to make a motion. I just don't know what should it be for the staff to come back with.
Yeah, maybe it's something along the lines, just, brainstorming here, for staff to explore, the access, turning the access road behind Seaside Lagoon to the hand launch facility into a one-way road, and report back to the commission on our investigation, and then report back on the opportunities to install SUP racks / kayak racks along the backside of the Seaside Lagoon fence. I just think there's some legwork for us to do, and we didn't want to do that until we had heard your thoughts. If you okay, a great idea to just close the road, that would have been a different conversation, right?
I got it. And in the interest of time, I'm going to make the motion, but would welcome anybody to chime in. Vicky?
One other thing, were we going to do something about 10-minute parking or 15-minute parking?
Well, let me make the motion and.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So here is my recommended motion. I would move that we request staff to evaluate the following recommendations of the Harbor Commission and to come back with the results of that evaluation. Number one, exploring one-way traffic flow to the hand launch boat ramp, and that includes potentially opening up the driveway by the Meistrel statue. Second, that we look at a temporary loading zone sign restricted to 10 or 15 minutes, something like that. Third, that we evaluate putting SUP and kayak racks by the fence for Seaside Lagoon, or even against the rocks, just so people aren't doing it against the actual ramp itself. What was that? That was third. Yeah, fourth, that signage on the dock itself saying that it is for loading and unloading small craft only.
Second.
Okay, before we vote, I would like to open it up to the public if anybody's out there. I think it's just Mark at this point. I don't see a hand up, but
Yeah, Mark is,
Before we go to public, I have one other comment.
okay.
Mark is your only attendee, and you do not have any e-comments on this item.
Roger?
And
So
Mark,
I've been looking at satellite views, and I think it is only blocked by a bollard on Portofino Way. But what I do want to say is that if we're able to open up the side access to this parking lot off Barrel, or what's actually Portofino Way there, that really improves traffic getting into that parking lot crossing the bike lane. If you want to go into that parking lot now, you go across Harbor Drive with a light instead of, just, praying to God and crossing the bike path with no light at the existing sign. So separate from that one-way traffic, when you get the metered parking in there, you should definitely evaluate opening up that side entry.
and
So
that
I'll-
is some, and that is some, yeah, go ahead, Jim. I'm sorry.
Add that as my fifth point as a friendly amendment.
You could, although I will tell you that, the capital improvement project to add the pay stations, we had already had that discussion about reopening that driveway, because the only reason it's really closed is to try to direct everybody to that one gate, right? And once you've got pay stations in there, it gives us that opportunity to go ahead and open that space. We don't have to control people to one location. So you're certainly free to throw it in your motion if you like, but I can tell you that's already been the game plan in terms of executing the current capital improvement plan that was just approved by the city council.
Well, then it should be easy to come back with us on.
Well, the only thing I don't want to do is, because it's already part of a capital improvement project, it might be cleaner to just leave it over there and maybe.
Roger, are you okay with leaving that?
I'm happy to leave it over there. And
Okay.
if I run over another bicyclist this week, I'm covered.
Okay, so I rescind my friendly amendment. Can I have a second on that, or is there more discussion? Does somebody want to add something?
I think I already seconded.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
And then I
Any
had
other-
discussion, and we were going to potentially public discussion. when I
Yeah,
jumped in.
and there's nobody
There is
out there.
none.
So.
Yeah, and you don't have any members of the public with their hand raised, nor do we have any e-comments on this topic.
So any other commissioner care to comment on this before we vote? Going once? Going twice. Okay, I'd like to call a roll call vote on this one, please.
Roll call vote on this. Commissioner Carlson,
Yes.
Commissioner Bauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Walters,
Yes.
Commissioner Callahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Kilroy,
Yes.
Commissioner Krazan,
Yes.
7-0 in favor.
I guess I'm in favor of it since I made.
Oh,
the
I'm
motion.
sorry, Chair Light, my bad. I was going down my screen. I got to the bottom. I didn't go back up to the top. Chair Light.
Yes.
Okay,
I know what I
7-0
said.
approved. Sorry about that.
And Steve, I thought you had to leave, so don't feel shy if you have to get to
Yeah.
your dinner.
Yeah, I thought I'd stay for the vote first, so I might buy out here in a few minutes.
Great.
Okay. Okay, with that, going to L4, the director's report.
All right, let me pull that up on my screen. I don't have a.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have to receive and file before we leave that?
Oh, that's not a bad idea.
So I move that we receive and file the letter and the staff report related to this item.
Second.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Now on to L4, Director's Report.
Yeah, and as I started to say, I have a very, very short report tonight, so I won't be here long. As I always do, I try to let you know what's happened at previous council meetings and what's coming up at upcoming council meetings. As I mentioned earlier, most of June was taken up with our budget hearings, but the one other thing that did get approved related to the harbor was at the June 8th meeting of the City Council. They did approve the plans and specs for the Harbor Patrol docks, and they authorized bidding for that project. So that is continuing to move forward through the process and is now out for bid for the construction of the new Harbor Patrol docks and the pump out facility. So that's a good news item that is moving forward. On the upcoming council items, as you may know, and I referenced earlier, maybe right before the meeting started, the July meeting of last week's City Council, the July 6th meeting, City Council meeting was postponed due to technical difficulties broadcasting the meeting out. So those agenda items were held over to tomorrow night. On that agenda tonight, we have a lease for a space on the International Boardwalk to a retail tenant called Mermaid's World. We also have a short-term lease for the old On the Rocks building. The Beach Life Festival would like to use that for kind of a command center and staging area. So they have a very short-term lease for that, just 6 months in duration max for that particular space. And then also on the agenda tomorrow night, we have a consent to assignment for the Fisherman's Wharf master lease. You may recall about 2 years ago, that lease changed hands from the Tritanich family to Next Century Power, which is controlled by Leo Pustelnikov. Mr. Pustelnikov and Next Century Power is now selling that leasehold, or has proposed to sell that leasehold to Mr. James Kwan. Some of you may know Mr. Kwan. He's a business operator out on the pier. He operates the Pacific Fish Market out there. And then he also was the previous operator of the Fun Fish Market that was next to the Fun Factory. So he's been a tenant out on the pier for a long period of time, and he is, I guess, decided he'd like to buy out the leasehold for his duration. He has some motivations to do that in terms of his longevity of his business out there. So I think it made some business sense for him to do that. That consent to assignment will be on the City Council agenda for tomorrow night. Then on the 20th of July, at the next meeting, a week from tomorrow, we expect to have, a couple of items on that agenda. One is a small office lease at Pier Plaza for a legal firm called Shaw Kopecki. And then of importance to you, and I know you all care deeply about this, we are bringing the Falcon contract back for the renewal with an increased amount of flying time, since we have that now funding for that. That was contained in this year's budget to have funding to increase the flight time. Last year during the pandemic, he was flying about half of what he was flying the previous year. So this will restore some of that flying time back to the contract. Since we now have people at the pier, we have more activity, we end up with more pest birds. So therefore we need more flight time for the Falcon contract itself. So that will go out on the 20th of July for their next meeting. Then just a couple of small updates. 4th of July update. I had a chance to talk to our public works folks as well as the marina manager. Everybody agreed that it was the 4th of July show was a great event. Pretty good fireworks display from what I understand. I wasn't able to attend. The only negative that we heard was that there was, as you can imagine, and I think we talked about, the fallout zone, kind of the containment zone of where it was. Being a land-based show, sounded like maybe there was a little bit of debris, a little bit of fallout that may have extended past the contained area there and gotten a little bit further out from that location, partly due to an onshore breeze. You know, even though they had the fireworks angled out over the water, the breeze was bringing that material back onto the shore. And then secondarily, the smoke associated with the fireworks itself was obviously closer to the people and closer to the condos. And I think we had gotten 1 or 2 complaints about, more smoke this year than there had been in previous years. Both the public works folks and our marina manager felt like it would be a great idea if we could get those back out onto the barge, that's probably a more preferred location for the launch. I know the King Harbor Association has expressed some interest in maybe participating next year, so that might help offset some of that cost. That was really the big driver, was the cost of renting the barge versus the landside program. So by all accounts, it was a good show. Likewise, I heard that the Avenue I, the Riviera Village Association, sounds like Commissioner Carlson, you got a good view of that one, that was a good show as well, and very well done. So all in all, a good 4th of July. I think other than maybe, like I said, some small operational issue in terms of the fallout zone. Otherwise, it went pretty well. The dredging, little update on dredging. We are still waiting to get back from the Army Corps of Engineers the draft permit. We've gotten a report from them that they're nearing completion on some NEPA documentation that they have to do, and the draft permit itself. So we're expecting to get that really any day. As you know, and I've reported previously, we still need to get permits from other regulatory agencies, such as the Regional Water Quality Control Board. But the first step in the process was to get the permit from the Army Corps of Engineers, and it appears we're close to getting that. We had some email traffic. This is an issue that's come up before, but we've also had a lot of email traffic today about the abandoned boat in the harbor. Sounds like there's finally some movement on that, getting that out of there. So we're happy to hear that. That's been a Harbor Patrol issue, and I know they're working to deal with the disposal of that particular vessel. It sounds like we've had some movement on that. And then the last thing that I had as kind of a follow-up item was the Redondo Beach Sailing Club. I had told you at your previous meeting that there was going to be a budget response report on this particular item. The City Council asked for additional information post-budget adoption on this particular topic, so I don't have any new news to report to you. I think that item is going to come back to them in terms of how they're going to approach the sailing program. So that one is still to be determined once that report goes back to them. Then, as I usually do, I let you know about events. We are into the summer concert series that has started. So if you have a chance to go out and enjoy one of the summer concerts out on the pier, this year, the Thursday concerts are going to be, I've lost the name now. They're all, Tribute Thursdays. Thank you. It finally came to me. So all of the bands that are playing on Thursday are tribute bands. So they did I think it was either last night or what's coming up this week is an all-female Van Halen tribute band. And then they're going to do there's going to be, so every Thursday night will be a tribute band, which is kind of a cool theme to have out on the pier. So, and then the Fridays will be more the original music that we've previously had as part of the summer concert series. So those are in full swing right now. We've also been working with the King Harbor Association to get the classic car show back up in the Ruby's parking lot. So hopefully you've had a chance to see that that's back up and running. Very well attended from what I gather. We've been, struggling to keep up and get porta potties out there and deal with some of those issues that go along with well-attended events. So good to see that some of the special events are coming back and we're seeing good crowds associated with those, which is hopefully driving some business to our local pier establishments down there. Your next meeting is August 9th. I would like to ask if you don't have to necessarily tell me now, but it would be good to know. August, sometimes we start to run into vacations. Sometimes we run into quorum issues. So if folks might be gone in August, if you could let us know, that would be great so that we can plan accordingly. With that really concludes my report. I'm trying to keep it short and sweet. Happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, so I'll go first. Any update on the skate park?
So we did get, I have now I think it did finally go out for bid. Gosh, and we got back, I want to make sure I get this right. Let me see if I can tell you the answer to that. Because I do have a proposal that I'm supposed to be reviewing. So what Public Works reported is they received a proposal for the skate park project. So I imagine they were able to send it out. And so we have an internal team that's going to reviewing that right now, but there was only one response. So I think that might make that process just a little bit easier. So they are moving forward with that particular work effort.
Will we get to see the more detailed plan before they?
Yeah, I haven't read the proposal, but the plan had been all along that you provided input. They went out. They don't have a final plan for it. It was really a concept plan that came to you, and so we'll figure out you into that process of review.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we were concerned about things like skateboards escaping.
Yeah.
Some of those items that are way too in the weeds to expect at a concept plan.
Right, exactly. No, we'll figure out a way to loop you in on that. I'll add that to my list.
Okay, and then outdoor dining, any movement on making that permanent?
No, we've sort of held off. We had our conversation and discussion maybe a couple of months ago about it. For now, we're letting the business operators operate on the temporary use permit, but I would expect as we get to the maybe August, September timeframe, we'll come back and meet with you again. I will report out to you that we did have one operator out there who erected a small shed. I don't know if you've been out there, you may have seen this. That was not part of their temporary use permit that was approved. And so I've been in communication with them to try to get that removed. It just wasn't something that was authorized. And it kind of goes to some of the comments we received from you about quality of furnishings, quality of look, and, to have somebody just go out and erect a temporary, facility out there without really having that be part of their permit process kind of runs counter to that. So we're trying to reel that one back in a little bit, but we'll be back probably to you on that. I want to say maybe in the August, September timeframe and really start looking at how we move forward with that process.
Okay, and then other than the Trutanich leasehold that we discussed earlier, anything else coming down in the harbor that you're working?
There are a lot of master lessees who are kind of, out there interested in having conversations. Probably the only one that has approached us recently has been the Cheesecake, it's not Cheesecake Factory, that's the lease. The Cheesecake Factory site. It's actually a lease that's with a company called Jack Built Incorporated. And they are interested in an extension in large part so that they can keep the Cheesecake Factory as their tenant. The Cheesecake is looking to extend their lease. And in order for them to meet that requirement, then Jack Built would have to extend their lease. We've had some conversations with them, largely centered around what happens along the perimeter walkway there, because as you know, that's the concern around sea level rise. And the public promenade area that we had shade construct. So how do we extend that public promenade along that frontage? If it's a shorter term lease, maybe it's not as big an issue, but if they want to go for a much longer term, then we'd have to have a conversation about the kinds of public improvements that need to go in there.
I don't know if you were here, but at one time the Guthries talked about cantilever and,
I've heard that. I've heard that it's that not a cheap proposition to be able to do that, and not necessarily the most ideal solution. The challenge with the Cheesecake is their building goes kind of right up to that edge.
Yeah.
When they put that patio piece in there, it really got right up to the edge of that walkway. So there would have to be a little bit of work to figure out how you maintain some kind of a 10 or 12 foot walkway as you go through that particular area, whether you need to weave around it or if they're thinking about doing some kind of improvements to the building, is there anything we could do to maybe pull them back from that property line as part of those improvements? But other than that, on the master lease side, we really don't have anything right now in the works that would be going to the city council anytime soon.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Roger.
Thanks. Thanks for bringing all the events back. And I've actually heard people talking about the Thursday cover bands. So that seems really popular and fun.
Yeah.
Just, great to see the whole list of all this stuff back. I haven't made yoga yet, but I have bought a kite. So
Perfect.
I'm hoping to at least make the kite festival. You mentioned, so you were talking about the status of dredging. And at one point you said that you were hoping to dredge the harbor in 2022 and it would have to be the first half a year.
Correct. To meet
that's coming up real quick.
It is. And we, we're sort of eager to get this piece with the Army Corps resolved. I contacted Public Works today and that was the update I got from them. So we're really, and it sounded like maybe there were some interagency comments that were going back and forth between the Army Corps of Engineers, and I can tell you if I pull the email up, but there were some interagency comments and they were just waiting to hear the last bit of interagency comments, and they were between National Marine Fisheries. So it sounded like the Army Corps of Engineers and National Marine Fisheries were still talking to one another about a couple of issues. And once they get that resolved, they would issue the draft permit to us. So, but yeah, that's the window we're trying to hit. We're still trying to hit that 2022, short window, late spring, where we had the opportunity to do it and deal with some of the sea bass issues that we had talked about previously. So, yeah, it's coming up. So hopefully we'll be able to make that window.
But are they ill-tempered sea bass?
It could be. Are there? Have you reached out to any contractors yet? I mean, I'm not sure how many people there are on the West Coast who can do this. And
I don't think Public Works has got, because we don't know what the conditions of the permit are yet. That's the challenge, right?
Fair enough. Okay.
As soon as we get the permit back from the Corps and we can see the conditions of the permit, then Public Works can start to, work up the work program and start getting that out on the street. But we really need to get that first from them, because that will actually take into consideration some of the comments you and others have made about the process.
Fair enough. Thanks. No other questions.
Okay. Anybody else? I cannot see any hands.
I don't.
It looks like
has her hand.
Who does?
I think Leslie.
Yeah, Leslie has her hand up.
Yes, I see it now.
My video keeps freezing. Yeah, I was just wondering on that, the separate application for maintenance, is that that went in and we don't have any word back on that?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure which project you're talking about.
For the dredging.
So we have not sent the main dredging project is the application that's in. We have not started the process of kind of the smaller maintenance dredging application where we would be able to do that on a more frequent basis. That's still something that's going to happen as part of our work program. But that was something we'd like to do, but we didn't end up doing a whole separate application for that right now. We were just advancing this first piece through the process. That's something we will have to come back to and figure that out in terms of how we move that forward as a separate application process.
Okay, because we had talked about trying to put that in and maybe the timing would work out such that we're done at the same time to save money.
Yeah, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So I think we'll probably have to come back and do a separate standalone, small maintenance dredging project like we talked about at one of the other jurisdictions where they're able to go in and, without having to go through a long protracted process, be able to do just little maintenance dredging in particular locations. We don't have two applications active right now that would allow us to do that. We're going to have to do that as a separate work effort.
I'll tell you, if we don't do something, the hand launch boat ramp is going to be a zero depth.
I know.
Whether we do anything or not.
Yeah.
Getting very shallow.
I'll make a note of that.
I'm not opposed to that, but then we should just formally commit to it and put a path down there instead of maintaining a dock and all that other.
Which was one of the discussions that we had around the money that was in the capital improvement program to do some design work for the hand launch facility. It could be that you're designing a dock type of a structure, or it could be that you're designing a path type structure that takes you down to a zero depth entry that cuts through the riprap down there. So that is certainly a possibility.
The amenities plan, but it is going to turn into zero depth on its own soon.
Yeah,
Well, at low tides, it already is.
yeah.
Okay, sorry, Leslie, I walked on you.
That's all I had. Thanks. No worries.
Okay, anybody else? I see we have one from the public, but I wanted to give commissioners a chance before I. Going once, going twice, okay. It looks like Mark has his hand up. Stephen, if you can.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mark Hansen, King Harbor Boater. Under the heading of events, I am happy to report that last Saturday we held the 29th annual charity regatta. All of the proceeds go to a laboratory that has been named after our event at Cedars-Sinai. At last count that day, I saw we were up to about $18,000 raised, which I thought was great for a pandemic year where we kind of threw it together at the last minute. If the arithmetic in my head is working about right, we should be somewhere right up around $700,000 that we've donated over the years to the Cedars-Sinai lab. So very, very proud of that event. And coming up this coming Sunday, the 18th, is going to be our opening day ceremonies. We normally do that in April, but of course, again, due to the pandemic, we put that off until July. It's not going to be as big as what we normally do, but we've invited a cross section of Commodores from other yacht clubs in Southern California. So it's just another feather in the cap for King Harbor and Redondo Beach, that folks that might not otherwise visit us come down and see our harbor. So just want to report on those two great events. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, let's see. I just lost my agenda. So I think we're at referrals to staff at this point.
Yeah, if you could just, I know I'm just maybe a motion to receive and file the director's report.
So is there anything written? What's
I think every month we do that. We say, even though it's not a written report.
No, I don't remember that, but.
Okay, well then you don't have to.
So moved.
All right.
We have a second on a non-written.
I'll second it.
I'll go back and check our minutes or our notes to see if we actually do that every month. For some reason, I thought we did.
Anybody opposed to receiving and filing the non-written report? Okay. On to. Oh, items from staff. Any items from staff? Sorry.
No additional items from staff.
Okay. And now commission items and referrals to staff. So let me go around in the order I have them here. Roger, you were first and then you went away, but Roger.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a referral to staff or a referral to our agenda on sea level rise. We've talked about this on and off, and it obviously didn't make this year's budget. I had to look back in agendas or in agendas. We started discussing this. We got the good report from Noble in actually July of 2019. So it was, 2 years ago, we started thinking about sea level rise, and with one thing and another, haven't touched it yet. I would just like to figure out what the next step is and how we get something done. The Noble report and the state say we need to be ready for 0.8 feet of sea level rise by 2030. That's 9.6 inches. 9.6 inches on top of the king tides we have now, on top of the normal high tides we have now, makes a lot of stuff wet. It makes a lot of stuff along the international boardwalk wet.
Yep.
It's a problem. So, what do we do? If we continue to do nothing, it's going to be 2030, and we're going to, it's going to look like the New York subway system here. So I would just like to figure out in one of these upcoming meetings what we do. And that's probably an RFP for a plan with better costs behind it. And then we go to the council for money, and, maybe we don't get this money till 2025. That's fine. But I'd like to put together a plan that, gets some kind of infrastructure in place by 2025, 2028, so that we actually have, a plan to get a foot of cement around the harbor.
When we had that detailed plan for how to cap Basin 3 and redo the gangways, and I haven't heard anything since then.
And I believe that's in work and could get funded more. But that was just to repair the cap that's there now. That doesn't help with sea level rise. And when you start getting sea level rise pushing up against that cap, and the sea level rise is pushing up against the caps, throughout the harbor. I've got video of the sea percolating through cracks in the cement, in every mole.
Yep.
So, we should do something. And I don't know how we get there from here. So that's my, again, very nebulous direction to staff. Maybe Vicky can help me on this one.
Well, again, as I say, it's always like Groundhog Day. We revisit and revisit and revisit, and someday we'll get it right.
Yeah, but someday we've got to ask for money, and maybe that's mid-year this year.
And I think part of that is what I believe is that the city is discussing this with leaseholders to be partnering in some of the expenses. That's my understanding. I'm not sure. I know a lot of the leases are up in 2032, and that will be a very big part of the discussion as far as I can see.
Yeah, I mean, we have a significant number of leases that come due in and around that time window. For example, the Port Royal lease comes due in 2032. If
King Harbor,
if we were to add 5 years to the Cheesecake lease, that would take that to 2032. So that's sort of kind of a magic year for some of the leases because they were done in and around the same time. At least there's a handful of significant ones that are starting to get close to that 10-year window from now. So, it does make some sense. And I think I had previously had the conversation to say, maybe it's through all the way. Maybe it's some kind of a document, and maybe it's an RFP for a sea level rise plan that becomes the basis for us to use in our negotiations with those leaseholders. Because that will be the challenge if we were to have somebody come in the door and want to do a lease renewal, to be able to articulate to them, okay, but here's what you need to do to, earn that leasehold from the city. We always have, for anybody who wants to do a master lease renewal, a requirement that they invest capital into their leasehold. So there's always a requirement for them to make an investment. And a lot of time it's, for let's say a Port Royal, it would be an investment in docks, it would be investment in some of those kinds of waterside components. But the question would be, is there an investment that we're going to require to support sea level rise? And what is that? And so I think having something that would give us, the Noble Report's great. It talks about some adaptive strategies. It talks about how you can step back and how you might work those. But they were conceptual and they weren't designed for each area of the harbor. They were just kind of almost like ideas on how to do adaptive management for sea level rise. It would be helpful if we had something more specific for particular locations that could guide some of those conversations. So that's just a little food for thought, maybe from our side.
Thanks. Yeah, that was already kind of a longer discussion than I wanted to do here. I appreciate it. I had thought this was all on. No. I had thought this was all on us. So hearing you say it's at least a partnership, gives me, some hope.
And I don't want to turn this into too long of a discussion item because we're on referrals. The only thing I'll say is it is, but when there are leases up for renewal, I think there's opportunities to have conversations. Our current leases have it all on us, right? We have maintenance and obligation and repair obligations, but when leaseholders are seeking renewals, especially long-term renewals, then we need to have conversations about what are their obligations and what are our obligations.
Well, if we wait till 2030, it could be 8 inches underwater.
Yeah, and typically they don't do that. Typically our long-term leaseholders will come in and start visiting us, 10 years, 8 years before their lease is due to start talking about lease renewals because they're eager to get, locked down for another extended period of time.
Yeah, we're 11 years away from renegotiating or starting the renegotiation. And it's like King Harbor Yacht Club, the Marina Cove Apartments, the whole King Harbor master lease with Majestic. So I see a partnership happening. I don't think it'll fall all on the city or all on the master leaseholder, but that's coming up pretty quick within the next 18 months.
Coastal
It is,
Commission
yeah.
have to weigh in on it too. So,
Pardon me?
if we had a plan that we got pre-approved by the Coastal Commission would help grease the skids for those projects.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps we should agendize, at the next short agenda meeting, a longer discussion of this and
Agreed.
what we want to do. So thanks for everyone's time.
Yep.
At least
Sorry.
it's not like boat again.
Sorry, I didn't mean to weigh in with all that.
No, thank you.
Okay, next I had was, I guess, Vicky.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I have nothing. Oh, yes, I do. Do we have an update on the Harbor Drive Marine Yacht Club Way intersection?
I'll take it away. I don't have one for you tonight, but I'll take that away as your referral to ask for the next time we meet.
I'd love to hear. Thank you.
Okay.
Speaking of derelict boats. Nothing else, Vicky?
No.
Okay, Matt?
Yeah, I just want to say the fireworks show was great. I was actually sitting at the Maestral statues, had a great view of them launching the rockets off and watching the smoke and everything else blow into the parking lot. I can see where there would be some issues. I think there was one shell that didn't launch the way it was supposed to. I don't know if they told you that. Kind of went sideways. But yeah, it was a great show, great finale. So it was good to get out there. And I think next year, maybe I'll rent a room at Crown Plaza.
They told me there were a couple that were a little low.
Yeah, that's putting it generously.
Speaking of, what is it, Scopima now or whatever they call it?
So Sonesta?
Sonesta? Is there something going on with Gold's Gym?
There was an item which was part of the closed session agenda. So all I can really tell you is there was a closed session agenda item for that property with Beach City's Health District.
So that's part of the State Lands Commission, the whole trade-off with.
Yeah, I mean, that property is Tidelands Trust property because it was purchased with Tidelands money. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we get brought into it eventually, and it is part of the Tidelands.
Yeah. Right now it was sort of a closed session real estate negotiation, so I can't.
A sort of, or?
It was.
Okay. Sorry for jumping on that.
No problem.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Whenever somebody clicks off their hand, it jumps around. Leslie.
Nothing more.
Okay, Tom?
Yes, one thing, I'm not exactly sure how to approach it, but Southern California, it relates to Roger's item, but being a little more proactive. Southern California Edison has allocated $300 million, it's like over 330 in funding to help businesses and the public sector install charging stations. And it looks pretty generous. They come out and help design it, and they pay for everything from the meter to the poles, and they give something like 80% back rebate on the construction costs that would have to be done. I was wondering what it would take to have to have staff apply, or to look into applying for one of these grants or being part of this program. It's called Charge Ready. Again, it's just sce.com/charge ready. And it's a pretty simple application process, but then they have consultants that come in and will help you design, set the entire thing up. And we have a fairly minimal requirements as far as us being approved for it.
What they don't tell you in the fine print is if you plug into one of those, it will suck power from your car to put into the grid when we're in flex alerts.
Yeah, there is something along that line.
That's a joke.
Hey, as a local homeowner, that's perfect.
Okay, anything else, Tom?
No, that's it.
Okay, let's see. I don't think I left anybody out. So I'm going to go next. I do think, Director Pratt, I'm not sure how we're looking at, rolling out the amenities plan and we know who's on the subcommittee from the Harbor Commission, but I think you may want to start considering who else would be added to that. Like, for example, Mole B, I could see not the Guthries, now the Ginsbergs and the Lanakila and the other outrigger boat clubs being part of that, but not necessarily part of the broader discussion. So I don't know if you've put any thought into that, but I think it is important to get some other stakeholders in that. And right. I don't need an answer tonight, but I did want to, kind of see what your thoughts on that were maybe in the next meeting. And then there is a follow-up item we had discussed when you talked about the new parking system down there, whether we can get a boaters or frequent user type permit for boaters and kayakers and folks like that. And so I'd like to see if there's any progress on that in the implementation plan. And then my last item, you asked about absences. I should be able to make the August meeting, but right now it looks like I have a business commitment that's going to take me out of town for the September meeting unless we change the date. And I don't think I could attend remotely even. I think I'll be in the air at the time this meeting is scheduled. And that's it for me.
Okay, we're going to nominate somebody else for chair anyway, so.
What? This isn't a dictatorship for life?
No, that's the month. Isn't that the month that we nominate?
I think so. I think October.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Because October we start a whole new dais. Yeah.
Well, I pre-nominate Roger, but you guys can work that when I'm gone.
But can't Jim just claim the whole system is rigged and stay in power?
That's right. Okay, let's not get into politics. So. Although that's fun. Okay, any seconds on referrals?
Nope.
Okay, with that, I will take a motion to adjourn right now to August 9th at 6:30 p.m. to TBD whether it's in person or Zoomed.
Correct, and we'll let you know that.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second. Anybody opposed? Okay, thanks everybody. The meeting is adjourned.
Good night.
Thanks,
Have a
everybody.
great summer.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
indeed.